As a young doctor working in a urology clinic, I recently had an unsettling experience with a patient. Let's call him Mr. Johnson, a man in his 50s. There was something off about him, something slimy, but I didn't think much of it and just did my job. His main complaint was erectile dysfunction, so I helped him thoroughly, maybe even a bit too thoroughly. This included extensive questioning about his sex life, a physical examination of his external genitalia, a digital rectal examination, blood work, the whole 9 yards. I always try to make my patients comfortable. It's not easy for an older guy to talk about such personal issues with a stranger, so I make an effort to chat, crack a few jokes, and make them feel at ease. I did the same with Mr. Johnson, prescribed him a PDE5 inhibitor, and set up a follow-up appointment to discuss the results of his blood work. 2 weeks later, I was in the clinic again and pulled up Mr. Johnson's file. He came into my consultation room, and instead of sitting across from me, he moved his chair next to mine, practically shoving it close. He sat with his legs wide apart and started the conversation. "You know, doctor, I'm so glad you got my file today. I missed you. How are you?" I replied, "I'm well, Mr. Johnson. Are those tablets working for you?" He ignored my question and continued, "You know, I'm glad it's you because that other doctor here, I think he's one of those gays, and we don't like gays, do we, doctor?" As he said this, he touched my leg. I removed his hand and asked again, "Are the tablets working for you, Mr. Johnson?" He giggled. "Wouldn't you like to know? You know, I love how personal you get with me. I even found a funny clip the other day that reminded me of us, and I promised myself I'd show it to you." He took out his phone and started scrolling through his clips. "Oh, this isn't the one, but it's funny too," he said, holding the phone eagerly to my face. It was a clip about a guy drawing a palm tree, but as he kept drawing, it turned into a penis. The coconuts were the testicles, and the palm leaves were the pubic hair. "Mr. Johnson, please, let's get on with it," I insisted. "No, doctor, please, just this one clip. You were so friendly last time. I like you too," he said as he continued scrolling. Then his eyes lit up. "Oh, here it is. Doctor, this is the one. Very funny. It reminds me so much of us." He held the phone to my face again, and the clip started with a large, naked man standing there. I thought it might still be a joke, so I waited. The clip continued with the door opening and another large man dressed as a doctor walking in. "So, you're the patient?" the doctor asked. "Yes, doctor," the naked man replied. "Lie down," the doctor said, and the naked man complied. The doctor then started examining him, accidentally touching his crotch. At this point, I felt something was horribly wrong. I looked at Mr. Johnson, who was eagerly holding the phone in front of me, but his eyes weren't on the screen, they were on me, with a skitty smile and childlike excitement in his eyes. "Mr. Johnson, why would you think I'd want to see this?" "No, just keep watching. It gets better," he insisted. He was showing me gay porn. I quickly ended the consultation, dismissed Mr. Johnson, and left the clinic. I walked out, all the way to the helicopter landing pad, and freaked out. I thought maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I was just taking it badly because I was molested as a child. I kept telling myself it was just a pass he made. Anyone can make a pass at anybody, right? It's normal. But as I stood there sobbing like a 6-year-old boy, I realized it wasn't normal. After pulling myself together, I went to the trauma unit next to the landing pad and told the doctors on call what had happened, presenting it as a joke, like it was just a funny anecdote. But nobody laughed. They looked horrified and kept asking if I was okay and if they could make me some coffee or something. That's when I realized what had happened to me was unacceptable. How messed up is that? Mr. Johnson came a few more times after that, but I made sure never to take his file again. Screw him. I eventually blocked the whole thing out until recently, when something triggered the memory. To clarify, I don't have a problem with homosexuality or even gay porn, but I do feel it's okay for me to not want to be forced to watch it. I'm a film student in college. and my buddies and I are always trying to find new locations to film our movies. I specialize in horror films, so the places I scout are often abandoned. Tonight, me and my group of friends, there were 10 of us in total, decided to check out an abandoned hospital down the street from our school. They had been there before and said it was a great spot for filming, so I decided to check it out. When we got there, I had my DSLR out with a handheld LED light attached to the top to scout the place. As we entered, I didn't film the encounter because I usually only shoot inside the locations. However, I had my camera and light out to illuminate our path. I was leading the way down a narrow path that led to some walls we had to climb to get onto the roof, which provided access to the inside of the building. Since I was carrying my camera and bag, I tried to find another way up. I walked a little further down the path and started noticing clothes, random shoes, and even cardboard boxes lying around. There was even an empty sleeping bag. That's when I realized we probably weren't alone, and that we might run into someone if we made the wrong move, and boy, did we ever. One of my friends, Ryan, walking behind me, noticed a door to my right. It was closed, and I figured it was locked and not worth trying. But before I could stop him, he had his hand on the door handle and started tugging. I looked over and it barely cracked open, but something was holding it from the inside. I shined my LED light into the room and saw a shirt tied to the inside door handle, acting as a makeshift lock. But Ryan, being the way he is, tugged again and ripped the shirt right off. The door swung wide open. Inside, there was someone sleeping on a table or couch, along with a group of terrifying-looking people sitting by a light in the room. They all stopped and stared at us. In that brief glimpse, my heart dropped. Ryan yelled, "Oh, get out of here," and slammed the door, bolting past me. I stood there, shaken, almost feeling like I should apologize, but instead I followed him. Meanwhile, our other 8 friends were already on the roof at this point and asked what was going on. We just ran for our lives out of the area. I heard the door behind us swing open, but I couldn't look back. Ryan and I met back at a higher part of the area, away from any entrance leading to the hospital. There was a small gap we could jump across to reach one of the roofs where our other friends were. About 4 of them followed us and jumped across, ready to get out of there, but the others stayed on the roof, frozen like statues. I looked at them, confused at what they were staring at. Then I began to hear metal dragging on concrete. I turned around and there was a crazy-looking man, maybe in his mid-20s, dragging a baseball bat with nails all along the end. He was walking towards us, dragging the bat along the concrete, acting just like Negan from The Walking Dead. My heart sank. I turned off my light, and the only illumination was the moonlight. I kept my hand on my pocket knife, desperately trying to think of anything to do if he started swinging. But I knew there was no way I would come out alive if I tried anything. Plus, I had to protect my camera. As he walked closer to us, the first thing he said was, "You're going to want to keep that light off." Everyone was silent. I was practically shaking. Then he started circling around us, saying, "You guys are never going to come back here, right?" He walked past me, saw the camera, and raised his bat, saying, "You're going to put that stupid camera away." I barely managed to say, Yeah, it's off." He looked over at my friends watching from the roof across the gap and pointed at them, saying, "Jump." They stood silent. The guy repeated, "Jump across right now. Just run and jump, you'll make it." The gap didn't look that bad, but the drop was fatal if you missed it. My 4 friends were all staring down at the drop, fearing what could happen. One of them said, "I don't think I can do it." The Negan-like guy replied, "Run and jump or else you're going to regret it." So, my friends stepped back, ran, and barely made the jump. One by one, the other 3 made the jump across, all while this guy stood right behind us with his bat, dragging it along the concrete. Once everyone was across, he said to us, "You're never going to come back here again, understand?" We awkwardly apologized and ran away, back to our cars. In the distance, I got into my car, looked back at the camera, and saw him still standing there, watching us with his bat as we sped off. Realistically, we could have probably ganged up on him as a group if anything bad happened, but who knows who else was back there. Sadly, the hospital is a no-go from here on out, but I'll still be looking around for some sick locations. What scared me the most about this was how fearless and disturbed this guy looked. He had definitely seen some Mo and had undoubtedly used that bat on someone else before. He looked like a killer. He had to have been a killer. It was his calmness that really got to me. Definitely a lesson learned. This story happened back in the 1990s to my parents during their senior year of high school. Since their group of friends already had cars, their favorite thing to do was night hiking around the state's local mental hospital, particularly to its old dairy farm. The farm was located on the side of a mountain, surrounded by agricultural fields and open grassland. Since the dairy farm was not close to the mental hospital, and the nearest city was about 5 miles away, the area was dark and eerily quiet at night. Before the dairy farm was closed down, patients from the mental hospital would go there to work. During this time, some patients lost their lives at this location due to accidents. By the 1990s, it was abandoned, and it looked like a ghost town, especially because of the rumors of it being haunted. It made the perfect place for a terrifying experience. On this particular night, around 2 in the morning, my dad, Sam, and my mom, Emily, along with 4 of their female friends and 1 male friend, planned to go to the dairy farm. They took 2 cars, and when they got to the usual parking spot on the side of the mountain, they saw a group of about 20 men standing around their cars. The men all had shaved heads, were Caucasian, and appeared to be in their mid-20s. As Sam and Emily, along with their friends, got out of their cars, both groups ignored each other, avoiding eye contact. However, as Emily turned her head, she saw one of the men pull back his jacket to reveal a pistol tucked in his pants. He then pulled back his lower lip, showing that he had KKK tattooed on it. Once they were out of hearing range, Emily whispered to Sam that the man had a gun and KKK tattooed on his lip. Sam brushed it off, thinking Emily was exaggerating, and said it was too dark to even notice those details. With that, they walked through the grassland to get to the dairy farm. The hike was about half a mile from where they parked. However, as soon as they reached the farm, they heard gunshots coming from the direction of their cars. Fearing something had happened to the vehicles, they sprinted back to the parking lot. When they got back, the group of men was already gone, but all the tires on their cars were slashed, and the windows were smashed. Sam noticed that his stereo and a distinctive colored blanket he used as a seat cover were stolen. Now they stood by their cars wondering what to do next. They couldn't just call someone for help. Nobody had cell phones, and they were deep in a secluded area. The nearest gas station with a payphone was at least 5 miles away. Sam and his male friend, Mark, didn't want to leave the cars alone since they were both classic cars and feared the men might return. Eventually, they decided that Sam and Mark would run to the gas station to get help, while the women stayed behind with the cars. Emily and her friends gathered heavy rocks to use as weapons and hid in the bushes and behind trees. 2 hours passed when Emily noticed headlights coming down the road. 2 tow trucks rolled into the parking lot. An immense fear spread through the group until they saw that it was Sam, his brothers, and Mark. They quickly hooked the cars to the tow trucks and got out of there in minutes. Sam told Emily that as they ran down the dark, empty road, they kept their eyes open in case the men were hiding with their car lights off. Luckily, they made it to the gas station without any problems. This next part might be hard to believe, but it's 100% true. 2 weeks later, after Sam had managed to get his car fully repaired, he and Emily were driving to a local store. As they parked and got out of the car, a man walking toward them caught Emily's attention. As he got closer, she realized it was the same man with the shaved head who had flashed the gun at her. Emily immediately told Sam, but just like the first time, he denied that it was the same man. Then, 2 weeks later, at the same store, while Sam and Emily were sitting in their car, another car pulled up next to them. The man got out and just stood by his car. Emily quickly noticed it was the same man again and immediately told Sam, who once again denied it. But then Emily looked into the man's car and saw the very recognizable, colorful blanket that Sam had used as a seat cover. This was when Sam finally connected the dots and got out of the car to confront the man. However, the man, realizing what was happening, jumped back into his car and drove away before they could get the license plate. The next week, when Sam was filling his car with gas, the same car pulled up right behind him. Once again, it was the same man. Sam immediately got in the guy's face, ready to confront him, but then the man's friend got out of the car and pulled out a gun. The man with the gun told everyone to get inside their cars, and then they drove away. It has been almost 30 years and they have never seen those men again. To this day, my parents still wonder if all those encounters were mere coincidences, or if something more sinister was at play. Back in November 2020, I was in and out of the hospital 8 times due to testicular torsion. Because why permanently fix a medical issue when you can just temporarily patch it up? On my last visit to one of the hospitals, I called a taxi to go home, but it was going to take about 30 to 40 minutes to get to me because it was a Saturday in the city. Since there was going to be a bit of a wait, I decided to sit down on a bench in a garden area just in front of the hospital. It was around 3 a.m., about 12 degrees CC, and I had been awake for at least 36 hours at that point. My taxi was on its way, and I was just sitting there cross-legged on the bench, headphones on, and nicotine keeping me alive. Everything was fine until about 10 minutes later when I noticed a guy very clearly walking directly toward me. He was stumbling a little bit, so I just assumed he was drunk. When he got level with me, he stopped right in front of me and said something that I didn't hear. I looked up and said, "What? Sorry, I had music on," as I pulled off my headphones. He looked me dead in the eye and just said, "I could batter you right now." Of everything I was expecting him to say, that wasn't on the list. I was caught off guard and tried to disarm him with humor by saying, "I don't doubt it." Thank God it worked, because he could have absolutely pummeled me into the ground. Every time I said that or something similar, he'd just repeat, "I could batter you. I want to deck you right here, right now. I could take you in a fight," just to recall a few of his comments. After his anger toned down, he sat on the bench next to me and started generally drunk rambling about his family, his friends, and very specifically, his best friend's girlfriend, with whom he was having an affair. Then, he pointed to my shoes and said, "Those are nice, mate. Can I have them?" Obviously, I said no, firmly but not aggressively, then thanked him and told him about the fact that I got them on sale. He then asked, "Can I touch them?" Which was immediately a big red flag. I politely declined, but he started rubbing my shoe anyway. I was still sitting cross-legged on the bench. Then, in one swift movement, he grabbed my ankle, pulled my entire leg up to his face, and put the entire toe of my size 11 Converse in his mouth. At that point, while I sat in stunned silence, I desperately started looking around. I saw the hospital police walking over. The officer asked if we were there together, and the guy said yes, while I said no. The officer then asked if the guy was a patient. I said yes, and the guy said no. I told the officer I was just waiting for my taxi, and the guy rambled about something, but I couldn't really make it out. The officer suggested the guy move along. He stood up, gave me a handshake, and walked off into the night. The officer, obviously confused, asked if I was okay. I told him what happened, and he was just as baffled as I was. After that, my taxi was due in 5 minutes, so I went and stood on the opposite side of the hospital where the taxi rank was. Later, I asked some friends who are familiar with a lot of drugs what the guy could have been on. They unanimously said meth, and that the shoe thing was probably just a fetish. My grandfather, Jim, died when I was 17, around 5 years ago. His last months were tough on the whole family. He had advanced brain cancer, but he spent most of his time at home under hospice care. One afternoon, about 2 weeks before Jim died, I was alone with him waiting for the hospice nurse to come check on him. A man I'd never seen before, named Dave, knocked on the door. He was wearing hospital scrubs, but he hadn't brought any equipment with him, which struck me as odd. I asked him if he worked for the hospital, and he nodded. He said it was his first shift with Jim, that he'd reviewed my grandfather's file, and that he wanted to speak to whichever family member had the legal authority to pull the plug. Jim wasn't even on life support, so I assumed Dave was using pull the plug as an expression. I should mention that I live in a right-to-die state where euthanasia is legal, so the option had crossed our minds. However, as far as I knew, No member of my family had ever expressed an openness to euthanizing Jim. I told Dave that I had no authority to make that decision, and explained that my grandfather, who was now delirious and unable to consent to much of anything, had specifically requested to have his life prolonged indefinitely unless he was crying out in extreme pain. And he wasn't. Dave put his hand on my shoulder as though he were consoling me, and started talking about how old people become burdens and that their families need to let go of them. Then, Dave pulled a bottle of pills out of his pocket, saying they were barbiturates that would trigger a peaceful death. He added that the coroner would determine that Jim died naturally from his cancer. I started to panic and firmly told Dave that under no circumstances would we be euthanizing Jim, but he began to untwist the bottle as he walked toward Jim's bed. I tried to wrestle the pills from his hand and he seemed startled. He played innocent, claiming he just wanted to show the pills to Jim, even though he knew perfectly well that my grandfather had almost no idea what was going on. I quickly called 911 and explained the situation to the dispatcher. Dave suddenly became very scared and bolted out of the house. The cops arrived within 5 minutes, and Jim's actual hospice nurse arrived a few minutes after that. Based on my physical description, the police and hospital staff were able to identify Dave as a recently fired hospital orderly. Dave was charged with making a criminal threat based on my testimony, but unfortunately he was acquitted.